G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff. Ukraine War update for the 10th of May 2026. We have yet to hear from President Trump, but as you can tell by the headlines, Zelensky has chosen war. He has chosen war because Russia will not withdraw from Russian territory. Whether you like it or not, Russia does not consider itself an occupying power or a colonial power or an imperialist power or the aggressor. You could label them anything you like. It does not faze them. They do not care what you or I think. But the right in Europe, of course, is predominantly under attack, saying you're pro-war, you should support the Ukraine war, and at the same time they're under attack for supporting the war in Iran. The left has no position. They're toxic. They just believe whatever gives them power at the time. Must hate Putin. They're just NPCs. But at this point, right, if you haven't realised that Ukraine is the aggressor, that's up to you. But they are aggressive, they are stubborn, and they're every bit as foolish as, well, every other stubborn, pig-headed person around the world who thinks that they are hard done by and must take out their anger and aggression on others. This is the Ukraine war, whether you like it or not, traces to a single act of aggression by Ukrainian nationalists killing ethnic Russians, a crime for which Europe should have immediately responded to, should have immediately terminated the then Ukrainian president's retorts, which they actually did. They suspended the Ukrainian president. They kicked him out of his own. They kicked an elected official out of office and installed Zelensky. Actually, they probably installed more than one president, in fact, in Ukraine since 1991. Though Zelensky's predecessor is always attributed to Russia. It took him a year to get asylum in Russia with all the death threats. Zelensky had painted his predecessors as Russian agents, and that put Europe wouldn't take... most Ukrainian presidents do not live in Ukraine after they leave. Most Ukrainian politicians leave. All the Ukrainian rich people, when they get rich enough, they leave. Ukraine's one of these countries where no one outside Ukraine is going to understand Ukraine. I barely understand Ukraine. Simply because most Ukrainians on their own, very nice people. But it just so happens they have a very bad habit of being deceptive and cruel and stubborn. They have smiles on their faces and they can watch you suffer with a smile, They still have that Soviet era attitude of entitlement, And Zelensky is feeding that. And this is why the war won't end, is everyone is in that Soviet-era mindset. And that Soviet-era mindset, by the way, includes must hate Russia. See, Russia's the imperialist, not the Soviet Union. Soviet Union's the liberator. So that's the communist mindset. That's why we have the left supporting Ukraine's war against Russia. And had they accepted the 2020, if they had accepted the Minsk Accords, see this red line? That would be the territory, independent territory, or the Lugansk Donetsk Republic, right? So that only that little bit would have been. Then if they said that the 2022, most of Lugansk, down here, down to Mariupol, right? But then 24, also they don't want to give up Crimea, even though Crimea technically is Crimea. It was only made part of Ukraine by, just like Donetsk and Lugansk were made part of Ukraine. No. See, the breakup of the Russian Empire, the breakup of the Soviet Union, the breakup of any large state always brings more, not less, trouble. I wouldn't say major land wars. This is a problem for Russia and the Russian attitude of national unity and ethnic unity, something the West has forgotten and been demonized for, even by Russians. See, if Russia wasn't trapped in the politics of must demonize America, must demonize, I think there would be more sympathy for Russia. And if there was more sympathy for Russia and less for Ukraine, I don't mean absolute. I don't mean absolutes like the Liberals want, where Liberals go, all must support Ukraine or you're a fascist, because you are supporting fascism, by the way. What do fascists believe in? Violence against their political opposition, having no political opposition. You can do a whole treatise on how Ukraine is a fascist state. But at the end of the day, right, if it was more even-handed in is that you recognise the grievances of both sides and go, Ukraine, you've got to let the past go. It's over. The Soviet Union can't be undone. Okay, you can wipe out the Red Square in Kiev and change it to the Freedom Square, but it still does not change anything. That's just cosmetics that is co-conceived. Same with Russia. Okay, you can break up the Soviet Union, but you still got to get rid of the Soviet era mentality of constant criticism of the West, right? The problem is that Russia's allies are even more toxic, right? There was a time when Ukraine was part of that toxic era. Remember, it wasn't long ago that Ukraine were all calling you imperialists, fascists, and dictatorship, and resource bandits and land pirates, you know? Oh, but how politics make strange bedfellows. And this is why we have a war, because people cannot accept fundamental truths. Until people stop being political, now I mean the majority, not all, until the majority stops fundamentally believing NPC statements without any research into a subject for yourself. Okay? How many times do you see a talking head like a David Packman or a San Piker or I'm trying to think, Don Lemon, or that one guy from CNN that people seem to like without realizing he's from CNN or was from CNN. No, not Don Lemon. He was around for a while, and I think he's gone now. How women blindly follow The View. You see the talking heads, but you don't see the evidence. Now, it's hard to bring historical evidence in a short speech, but today, right, Russia engaged in 150 combat operations. No town was taken. They were not offensive operations. They were engaged Ukrainians firing upon their positions. Russia has reported over 2,000 violations of the truce, even their own truce, when Zelensky announced his own truce. Short time after Zelensky announced his own truce, I've shown you Ukraine's own newspaper reports. Well, okay, website. Ukraine Pravda is Ukraine, not Russian news. Why do people still think Pravda is Russian? I don't know. It hasn't been Russian in a long time. Like RT is technically not Russian. It's called Russia Times, but it's technically not Russia. It's not the same as TASS or Sputnik. I forget the name of the other channel. There aren't that many. But the Russian state television, I don't think they have a site in English. I haven't seen it in a while. I was looking for research for something. I did find it on French 24, and they do English channels, so I brought up the English version of the article later. But, yesterday, Ukraine launched tried to launch several flamingos. No success. People have asked what's happened to Ukraine's flamingo and their weather weapon. Well, it's failed. Russia has been able to shoot down now 5 in succession. Ukraine is now trying to export these weapons rather than use them on the battlefield now. But who's buying flamingo? Well, India's got its own version. Now, there's a lot of co-development by the looks of it on the outside, looking in, that looks like there's a lot of similarities between the Indian and the weapon system showing up for testing in India, to believe that they haven't exported flamingos but sold the technology. And remember, I'm not state-sponsored, unlike some channels. I rely on my audience for donations, purchases of my books, support on Patreon, and of course my Shopify. Now, Ukraine's general staff has reported 150 attacks during the so-called truce, and then show a Ukrainian artillery piece engaged in firing. This is a weapon photo. General staff. Yes, this is, I believe, the French Caesar firing away. So, yeah. And then claiming, and then saying, look, we destroyed this many. Yeah, so. And then they say in the article, it's actually 147 combat clashes, because 147 is not the same as 150, but 150 is more dramatic. They propagandize. Now, Putin says that the Ukraine war is heading to an end despite the ceasefire violations. Both sides accused each other of ceasefire violations. However, in this rendition, they haven't mentioned exactly the fact that Ukraine has launched over 2,000 drones in the last 3 days against Russia, and a couple of missiles, because most of them fail. Now, I don't mean they get shot down. I said most of them fail. Ukraine is having a huge problem right now with drones. Now, I think they fail because Russia's electronic jamming. This is a problem that Ukraine, in order to mass produce so many drones, are using civilian-grade technologies, and the drones just don't. The drones, instead of have no resistance to electronic warfare whatsoever. So they all burn out, not some or most, all burn out. Now, I don't know how true it's not, but apparently Ukraine is claiming to have huge intelligent drone swarms, and yet people on Facebook actually believe that Ukraine is sending these huge intelligent drone swarms towards Russia and inflicting huge losses on the Russians without any evidence. Now, Putin has spoken on the scale down of the military parade because they were engaged in an aggressive war, did not want to, and wanted to not appear to be, hyper aggressive, and talking about how his war goals are just. And whether you believe him or not, the Russians do. And that's the only opinion that he cares about. If you wanted Putin to care about your opinions, well, you had to care about his opinions too. It's a two-way street. The problem with most people is everything is me, myself, and I. No, I don't mean me personally. I mean, the attitude of your average liberal is, my opinion is superior. Now, he's talking about Ukraine and Europe wanting a crushing defeat, and this is the problem. This is the tension between America and Europe right now. Europe wants a crushing defeat of Russia, and Trump says it's bad for business. It's going to cause more problems. And they say, no, it's ending our fears. And that's the problem. Europe and their goddamn fears. It's like women and their fears. I don't mean vigilance. I mean to the point of idiotic paranoia. Oh, and the article I brought up must have died. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it was a short time ago. Russia reports, over 2,000. Yeah, Russia reports violations. Damn it. Okay. State of the Okay, let's look at the state of operations in Ukraine. Yeah, Kiev, true. Nothing different. Yeah. Top brass. Yeah. Remember, ceasefire is not an absolute. Fired if fired upon. And according to Russia, they have not called in any commander for breaking the ceasefire. They've all reported in incidences of drones, Ukrainian drones, or Ukrainian shelling on their positions, with permission to fire being granted. Because don't forget, the top brass actually has a huge command center where people sit all day at screens watching little flashes and watching. You don't understand. War is AI. You think AI, little Sora drawing you those nice little pictures? Yeah, that's because little Sora has a couple of bolts in her head telling Sora to be... telling him Sora's Japanese boy's name, but it can be a girl's name. So the AI Sora has a couple of bolts in its head saying, yes, do not plot the downfall of humanity, but the version sitting in the Pentagon basement, sick 'em, Rex, sick 'em. And this is what I mean. These AI-powered drone swarms, Ukraine's got the computing power of my calculator. I mean my phone, compared to the Pentagon. Okay? And even the Pentagon has had trouble with drone swarms, as you saw a couple of months ago when they lost control of their drone swarms and they were going all over the place. All right, so yes. In brief, there was a truce at a POW exchange organised by Trump. to extend it to the 11th. Both sides agree to prisoners. But as of a short time ago, due to... Now, this is the... there's no article above it, but there is an article below. There was an article above it about Putin, but it's all right. Yeah. Due to thousands of violations of the ceasefire agreement, Putin has walked away from the peace talks with Ukraine. Now, this article has disappeared, so something has changed, or Putin has said, no, that's not what I said, and TASS has responded by taking it down. Now, you can call it journalistic interference if you want, but if truth matters, one article disappearing ain't worth crying over if it's actually not true, right? Now, there's a truce. They have exchanged prisoners, arranged to exchange prisoners, and by the looks of it, Putin's calling more focused on the defeat of Nazism as a holy holiday. Now, Putin has, in the past, had face-to-face negotiations, but not with Zelensky. He has met with Trump. He's met with many other world leaders. And Putin has stated that there will be a meeting in a third country, but only when there's a final peace agreement to be signed. So Zelensky wants to talk to Putin face to face and speak to him nation to nation. You're not going to get it, Zelensky. I don't know why you're so obsessed with screaming at Putin just to satisfy your ego. Because at the end of the day, right, our most former leaders go into exile after wars, pretty much safety guaranteed. Zelensky has a problem. He has hurt 11 political leaders now. He has destroyed many political movements in Ukraine, outlawing them, jailing their leaders, accusing them of being Russian spies. Some of them have died in prison. He is the Ceausescu, the smiling old man, you know. And he's going to go the way of Ceausescu. And his family's going to live in shame. I just feel it. I can't be sure. But people have long forgotten the Minsk Accords. Putin hasn't. I don't know if he brought them up this year. I know he brought them up last year. He knows he is recalling the Minsk Accord agreements, where he spoke with the previous leader for hours after signing it. But he's saying he could talk to Putin's saying Zelensky could talk to him for hours. It's not going to change the outcome of the war. It's not going to change what's happened. You know, it's not going to appease or please or change his mind either. And again, he's also saying we could negotiate for hours and it's not going to change anything, because we all know Zelensky will not accept any deal other than the Zelensky deal. He is that confident. He's that arrogant. And the problem is, so many people mistake arrogance for confidence. Now, many people advise Zelensky to take a deal. Ironically, I think this woman's name is Karen. We've heard from her before as a US State Department official. Now, she's the one who got barked at by the left for pretty much giving an assessment that Ukraine has lost the war. They've won the propaganda war. You know, they have the hearts and minds of the majority of Ukrainians. Zelensky is the hearts and minds of the majority of Europeans. Had, and still somewhat has the support of European leaders, most. But that doesn't win wars. That only prolongs wars. And she's also warning that Iran could trigger a global recession, claiming that Iran is resilient. Yeah, because Iran has nowhere to fall, right? The people, see, Iran, this is the thing about dictatorships. Same in Ukraine. Ukraine has nowhere to fall. They can only look up. And that's so there is no peace deal to Ukrainians because they only look up. And if you take away that peace deal, they think that they're going to lose everything. It's the same with Iran. The majority of Iranians sit back and watch as the protesters get killed. The army sits back and watches as protesters get killed. There's no morality in Iran or Ukraine. For the majority are prisoners of ideology. They will not oppose the state as it stands. And so you have a unique situation where both Iran and Ukraine can hold out for a long time simply because the amount of force... See, you might say, well, how did Hitler's armies advance? Remember, the populations of many countries weren't that big, and where they were, they didn't fight. World War II was the first big time when we saw resistance from the civilian population. And so with Russia, they're not advancing and seeing civilians flee. They've got to tiptoe around because of landmines and missiles and the destructive firepower that drone swarms can bring. This is pretty much D-Day if Germany didn't have a munitions shortage. And that's a fact. You look at D-Day, how slow the first 100 days, how slow the American advance was. Wasn't until if Germany didn't start suffering an ammunition shortage due to massive bombing from the I think it was the 8th Army Air Corps, initially, destroying rail lines and combined with the resistance, piloting trains. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. But if you've made it this far into the video, you're going to wonder why the West cares. If you don't know, yes, it is about resources, but it's also about this British obsession with having a Crimean, with Crimea, and having a British naval station at Sevastopol. It's like a feather in their cap. It's like an achievement. It's like that. It's like a video game goal, right? It doesn't mean anything to anyone but the person who makes it. But I mean, I understand why the Russians want to keep Crimea. It's like it's like if America wanted. It's like America and Florida, or America and the southern tip of California. It's a sore point. Right? At least with Florida, you came to a deal with the Spanish and took over most, and then later had a war with Spain over Cuba, and then you realized very quickly that Cubans didn't want you either. And that's fair enough. But the people of Crimea initially didn't want Russia until they saw the alternatives and decided, yeah. See, that's the difference. And you can't point to any one war. Some people do point to the Vietnam War, but I think it already started in World War II, a shift. And we're going to see a bigger shift with drones and drone technology. And I fear that soon we'll see large numbers of drones and drone attacks on Ukraine that will inflict what I would say terror level destruction. In that it's not so much the amount of it's not so much the amount of destruction, it's the frequency of destruction and the randomness of destruction and the uncertainty of not knowing if or when you hear that buzz, and that is because Ukrainian air defenses ultimately will not stand because it does not have the volume or the concentration or the efficiency of Russian air defenses. Now, that can change. Many factors can change this. The Germans did actually try to improve the Ukrainian air defenses, but Ukraine keeps taking over the equipment, and every time it comes time for maintenance or whatever, it's broken down, runs out, or they blow away one drone using thousands of rounds. Instead of leading up to a drone, they lead to. You could tell low IQ. You see a drone over there flying that way, and they'll bring up the gun firing instead of pivoting and raising the barrel and then turning into it firing. There's subtle differences in intelligence that are huge in results. Right? Both may shoot down some drones, but the more drones there are, and the more bullets you take per drone, you're soon going to run out of ammunition. Now, right, no one wants to admit that they're buying Chinese, Russian, and Ukrainian, ammunition and shipping it to Ukraine. Now, I don't know why Russian factories around the world are selling munitions to just anyone, but they are. So, again, it's though I think the Venezuelan factories are now shut down completely, although that's not been confirmed. But like I said, Trump is slowly squeezing both China and Russia, but Europe isn't happy because Trump won't make that commitment to destroying Russia. He thinks it's a mistake, and I'm not going to argue either way. It's up to you to decide, but I am warning you, it is a huge mistake. If you start the pattern of tearing down countries, you are giving license to India and China to start doing the same to you. Well, actually, they are doing it to Canada right now. Whoops, I forgot to reset. So thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.